I want it, I want it, I want it, I want it. It's a desperation almost. It's so stressful. I'm gonna do this. I got I'm beating myself up, and then turn it around. I don't want to get enlightened. It sounds sacrilegious at first, but what it's doing is just saying, hey, tone it down, back it up. Okay, yeah, you want it, but maybe not. Let's just see, how is it possible you don't want it? How is it okay if you don't have enlightenment? How's your life going fine now in the state of consciousness you have right now?
When we crossed paths was here back here in Fairfield. You were traveling, and you were, I think, invited here by a family that I was close friends with to come lead a workshop. And so I showed up for that. And um, like you, you asked the group if anyone wanted to be facilitated in front of the group. And so I volunteered for that. Um, and so you facilitated me on a worksheet on this girl who was something to the gist that I wasn't getting her approval. I remember, and the whole worksheet was on that and that stress, and I now am living with that girl.
Cool.
Yeah, so all worked out. Uh, and and it would have worked out either way, given the nature of an open mind. Um, so I think, would you mind, for a lot of the people watching, they're not all that familiar with the work, and I thought a great way of kind of introducing that would be you telling me a little bit about um, that that experience you had with Byron Katie on stage that was at one point up on YouTube about um, this thought you had, this judgment you had about yourself that you were not living up to your full potential. Would you mind sharing about that and what you learned and how that went for you?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a loaded thought there. I'm not living up to my full potential, and probably one that's been with me all my life in different forms. It was coming up at that particular time. Uh, I guess it was a combination of financially, I wasn't doing very well, and so on the outward side, I felt like I'm not living up to that kind of potential. And to me, that was just one part of it because when that wasn't working, then I also started thinking, and what am I doing? I'm kind of wasting my life. I'm not even living up to my inward potential in terms of growth towards enlightenment and inner peace, and just I felt like I was wasting my life. And it was so I just brought it. The way the work works is you start with a stressful thought. Usually it's a situation, and then what you kind of identify what's the thought or one of the thoughts that's bugging you in that situation, and you write it down and you start to question it. And so I started going through these questions with Byron Katie. Is it true I'm not living up to my full potential? And I can't remember how I answered at the time. I probably would have said yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and then the next question is, can you absolutely know it's true? So it really makes you pause and think, are you really, is this belief really absolutely true? And again, I don't remember how I answered, but the idea is it starts you slowing you down. What you think you're so sure of is not necessarily. You don't know. You have to look and find out. You might find out it is true, but it might not be. So, so then we went into how do you react? How do you live your life when you think that you're not living up to your full potential? This is the third question of the work. And so I started to reflect on um, how stressful it is to think that thought, and how tied in knots I can get. And on top of not having great finances or not having enough time to do as much meditation as I want, and on top of that, now I'm feeling guilty and like hard on myself and just like I'm adding stress on top of stress, in other words.
Mm.
So then, going through that, the next question would be, who would you be without the thought? And it's an imagine, you kind of imagine, who would it be? What would it be like if I didn't think that I'm not living up to my full potential? And again, I don't remember exactly what I said during that video. It was a long time ago. But the sense of it as I'm revisiting it now is just more lightness, more easiness. Like, okay, so finances aren't going perfect. What can I do? Right? Instead of like, oh, I can't do anything. I'm a failure. I can't, you start to feel a little more empowered because you start to think, okay, not, not everything is out of my control. There's things I can do. And then acceptance also increases because I'm starting to think, okay, maybe the path I'm on isn't exactly right, and so I can explore what are some other alternatives. And so where I went with that, literally about a week after that session with her, I decided, it didn't make sense to me to keep being a nature photographer, which I didn't know how to make money at. And at the same time, it was right when digital photography was coming in and stock photography was going from like people used to pay, I don't know, $200 for an image down to like $1 for an image. And
Oh, wow.
suddenly it's like there's just no way,
There's no
unless you're a
way.
really good business person, to make it work. So,
Yeah.
and I started thinking, is that really what I want to do anyway? And I always had felt like I'm not, there's something not, it's not the whole thing. I love photography, but it's not why I'm here. So I guess reviewing that now as I'm thinking about it, it got me to think about myself and become a little clearer about what I would like to do. And it also, I guess one of the main outcomes from that work was realizing that I could do anything. I could work at McDonald's, or I could work
Hmm.
at Home Depot, I think was the one I found. And how simple it was and how easy that could be and how balanced that could be. And so I did that. I didn't work at Home Depot, but I worked at with another company for a while. I did some work on their websites and I did some little bit of photography and some writing and it was their work. It was their job and I wasn't working for myself and it was a nice balance. So yeah, that's kind of how it led me. And then when they couldn't pay me, I decided I couldn't work for them as well. And so I moved on back, and that's when I started training with the work of Byron Katie and started working for myself again. But now I'm working for myself, doing something that feels even more in resonance, in accord with what I'm wanting to do. And but those thoughts still will come up from time to time, like, oh, okay, are my priorities really right here? Should I be doing more time in meditation and less time in business and things like that? Those doubts come up. But I recently questioned one thought just like that. My priorities are all wrong. And I found that no, I'm finding a balanced way of living that's both inward and outward. And this is one of the ways that I'm doing it. And so for me, the work of Byron Katie is a way of looking at what I'm thinking and seeing um, that sometimes the opposite of what I think is actually truer than what I'm believing. And that's very freeing because it means you don't have to change the world so much. Just change your thinking a little bit, and the world can be experienced very differently.
You were talking about being in resonance. And so I just read this quote from Joseph Campbell this morning, which says, he says, I don't think the meaning of life is what we're seeking. I think it's an experience of being alive, so that our life experiences on the purely physical plane will have resonances within our own innermost being and reality, so that we actually feel the rapture of being alive.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I took away from that is one of the fruits of you stopping to look at that religion, my word, that you held was that I have a full potential. It looks something like this, and I'm not doing it. And then actually taking a time out, saying, is that true? Questioning if that's true. And then one of the things that comes up is, oh, there's actually a different path that I'm not in resonance with. Fine.
Exactly. I think the mind gets so limited, like it's just so focused on, like you say, religion, like this is the right thing to do. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is our own personal internal religions that we all have is what we're believing to be true.
Yeah.
And then when you take this kind of time out, as you put it, and start to question, is that really true? You may start to see that there are many more paths that go to where you're wanting to go or that resonate with you besides just the one that you're attached to.
Yes.
And we get a story of like, I think I was comparing myself to life in the ashram where I'm meditating like 8 hours a day and I'm really on this inward dive. And I idealize that as the only way that I can be happy and express my full potential or grow in that direction. And it is it is wonderful, but it's not the whole story. And I think as I have questioned these thoughts again and again in different ways, I've started to see that my own path is unique. It has its own flow to it, and I have to listen to that. I think that's probably the essence of what the work of Byron Katie does for me, is that it gets me to listen to myself by stopping me and saying, "Hey, is that really true? What you're thinking, is that really true?" It makes me ask myself, what is true for me? What is truer? And I start to find things that I didn't, either I wasn't paying attention to, or I just didn't even see until I stopped and looked again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to come back to that too. And first, I just wanted to relate. Our paths have so much in common. So I went to the Transcendental Meditation School. You were a teacher at that school, a teacher of mine. Then, like you, I went on to become a teacher of the Transcendental Meditation technique. And that was useful. And I still practice TM. It's something that's very sacred to me. It's a family practice, it's a family tradition as well as something that I find very nourishing. And and then yeah, it just didn't solve all my problems. Life still came at me, and I still had stressful responses to that, even though TM is a stress management technique at its most basic level. And I got into kind of the world of the mind and thoughts and Byron Katie. And I never became a certified facilitator, but I took a whack at it. I really went for it. And then it's been a very big part of my life, as big as TM now, where I um, practice it. And then I also can relate to you as far as this full potential. I'm gonna think, is it a religion? It's like this ethos. It's like this. It's a myth, right? And it might be true, but I relate to it as if it's true, but I don't have any uh, uh, exterior proof of that. I'm treating that. Um, the myth is that I'm put here to live up to my full potential. And there's good, true, and beautiful about that. I love that myth. Like I grew up in baseball, capitalism, be number one, kick some ass, and that first started off in all the kind of young man ways of being competitive, making a lot of money was the goal. It still is, of course, but it was held as that. And then I switched it to spirituality, similar to you, where it's like, okay, full potential is full unity consciousness, one with the universe, um, Sat Chidananda, eternal bliss consciousness, forever and ever and ever, and, which is also beautiful. And it's also not the reality I'm conscious of. In other words, I still have to get up. I still have to pay bills. I still am unhappy with the situation as it is. And when I'm in that myth as if it's a given, because it really feels like it's true, right? Uh, yeah, it's it's like purgatory, if not hell at times, but it's mostly just like purgatory. And so I wanted to come back. There's something, one of the most fascinating things about the work, the question, is it true? Uh, One of the biggest things I got out of that is just the simple, like, holy crap, I'm walking around acting as if that myth that I need to live up to a full potential is true. And I never, ever once even thought that it was a valid question to ask if that's true. And then any thought, I want ice cream. Is it true? It's like, well, by virtue of the fact that I had the thought, it must be true. And then Byron Katie comes along and just like throws it, turns it on its head. And so we live in this culture of full potential, right? It's everywhere. It's social media. And before we had social media, it was on billboards, right? It's the American dream. It's being your best. And so, again, I want to say I love that game. Um, and I think when people hear, is it true, um, that it's antithetical to who they are because they've identified with this this story about being living to their full potential, and anything short of that would be giving up. Um, and so, I'm really curious how you hold that, right? And this also goes back. I mentioned earlier before we recorded that this is has its some resonant notes in the Bhagavad Gita, which I think you and I we covered in high school together actually. And the one of the core teachings of the Bhagavad Gita is, as I take it, is be 100% engaged without being attached to the fruits of your actions. In other words, you have a right to action. You don't have a right to results. And so I'm curious how you hold these polarities.
Yeah, you put your finger right on it. That's exactly how I see it as well. You know, having an ideal to shoot for, having an idea of what full potential means is an inspiring thing. It's a good thing. It gives me a vision, right, of where I could go, and that can be an organizing principle in your life, right? That's not a bad thing at all. Wanting whatever it is that I want, whether it's spiritual uh, results or whether it's like monetary results or whatever it is, a better relationship. These things, we're shooting for something good, and I think that's a really healthy thing to do. Except when I get attached to it. Like now,
Right.
unless I get that, I'm a failure. Okay, now
Yes.
that's not healthy. Now, something beautiful, something inspiring has now turned into something, a point of torture in a way. And so, what the work does is says, hey, you're feeling stress. What are you feeling stress about? The reason I'm feeling stress is because I've gotten attached to something good. And the goodness is not the problem. It's good to make money. It's good to be spiritually developed. It's good to have good relationships. These things are good. But when I have become attached to the fruit, as you mentioned, then the fruit of action, when I'm attached to that, now everything is measured according to that, and either I'm getting closer or I'm not, either I'm succeeding or I'm failing, and my life emotionally goes up and down based on how close or far away I am to achieving my goals. And so that's what, our teacher, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, always used to say, you're a football of situations and circumstances. Because
Mm.
whatever you're successful, life is great. And whenever you're not successful, life is terrible. So you're just up and down and up and down. There's no stability, there's no fun in that. So what I experience with both from meditating, from doing TM, as well as from doing the work, is that a little more, little less attachment is there on these goals that I have. I hold them a little more loosely. And the more loosely I hold them, the more the more easy it is to pursue them without getting stressed, without
Mm,
getting either super happy or super unhappy as a result of whatever it is I'm doing. The way it works with TM is you're just meditating on a regular basis, and there's a kind of inner happiness that starts to come that's just
mhm,
there. And so it doesn't matter so much whether you win at whatever game you're playing, whether you reach your goals or not, because basically life is okay. The
mhm,
inside is feeling contentment. And so that's how it works with that practice. With the work of Byron Katie, the way it works is you take the actual thought, I want to reach enlightenment, say, and you question it, and you turn it around and find out like, well, first of all, you see what it's like to believe that thought and how stressful it is, and imagine who you'd be without the thought,
mm,
and you start to turn around and go, oh, I don't have to live up to my full potential. I don't have to get enlightened. Not yet, right? I'm
mhm,
still holding that as a possibility, but that's not where I'm at. So why beat myself up over something that I don't fully have control over? And so by questioning the thought, the desire, the need, I start to hold it more loosely naturally and I start to relax. And then I can still have that little ideal of where I'd love to be in my mind, but it's not driving me. I'm not a slave to it. I'm not depressed over it. I'm easy about it.
yeah,
So yeah, that's why I love these two together, the transcendental meditation and then the work of Byron Katie, they work together so well. I consider them like two complementary approaches to loosening the attachment that I have to whatever it is that I'm wanting to get to.
mhm. Yeah, and I'm sure you're familiar with the rebuttal is well, if I don't believe that I need to live up to my full potential, I'm not going to get out of the bed in the morning, and I'm not going to try as hard. Um, that's the common, yeah, that's the common pushback, right? And it's one that even I notice I share. It's like I got to be fired up. I'm curious what your thoughts are about that
Yeah,
that
no, that's
pushback.
a really good one. So the way I think of the work of Byron Katie, it's like medicine, like if I have a cough, then I take a cough medicine and it kind of changes my symptoms. It reduces it.
Mm,
But if I don't have a cough, I don't take that cough medicine because it probably will make me sick if I keep taking that when I don't need it. It's there to balance things. The,
mhm,
the the medicine is there to bring things back to balance, and then you can just stop the medicine. So the same thing with these turnarounds and these like when you're thinking, uh, I like basically what I'm believing when I'm really attached is I have to try really hard, I have to work really hard, I have to get fired up, I have to push myself. And so, yes, the work is going to probably point you in a direction of maybe you shouldn't work so hard. Maybe you shouldn't push so hard. Maybe you shouldn't be so fired up about it. And on the one hand, it does sound like, oh, well, why am I going to even get out of bed in the morning?
mhm,
But think of it this way. I was pushing to the max over here and straining every muscle to get there. And this just brings me back to more of a balanced point. And so the turnaround balances the original statement. So I'm I I'm I want to get enlightened, let's say. I want it, I want it, I want it, I want it. It's a desperation almost. It's so stressful. I'm gonna do this. I got beating myself up. And then turn it around. I don't want to get enlightened. It sounds sacrilegious at first, but what it's doing is just saying, hey, tone it down, back it
Hmm.
up. Okay, yeah, yeah, you want it, but maybe not. Let's just see, how is it possible you don't want it? How is it okay if you don't have enlightenment? How's your life going fine now in the state of consciousness you have right now? And so when you start to balance the turnaround with the original statement, you come to a middle point where, okay, yeah, I'm still aware of my desires, but it's toned down to a place of balance. The fear is I'll go to the other extreme, and we do this sometimes. Like, okay, well, if I can't get what I'm going to get, then I just don't want it at all, which is kind
Hmm.
of the immature way of approaching something, and then just like forget it.
Yes.
But that's not really where the work's pointing. It's just saying find the balance point, find the place where you can want without attachment, where you can pursue your dreams without getting depressed over them when they don't manifest in an instant. It's a place of balance between wanting and not wanting. Like I like to say wanting without wanting.
Yeah.
There's no way to really express it perfectly, but it's a coexistence of opposites where I'm wanting something, but I'm not attached to it. And that's what the tool of the work of Byron Katie can bring you towards. But you have to feel out when you're going too far with it, when to balance it back, like it's
Yeah.
about listening to yourself.
So that makes sense. So that's why, and before getting into those examples of the opposite of your original thought, we sit in that. Question 4 is, who would I be without, if I didn't believe that I want to be enlightened? And every time I do that, and it's a meditation, right? And I just go into that space, it's peace, which is the thing that I've been seeking in the first place. And also, I just noticed like there's something more freed up that still wants, like, what I am is a movement towards something greater. And then I think I have a story. I interpret that nature that I have into a story, which is, and the story is, I want to be better than I am. And those two things are so similar, but but there is, but yet they're completely different. Right? One is just a nature, true nature. This is what I am. It's something that seems to be moving towards this, and then I develop this story about it, and then I have to live up to that story. Yeah, and and we see this both in conventional materialism and spiritual materialism, where it's self-defeating. So we know the story, like, I'm gonna be a millionaire and then I'll be happy, and you get all these things, and then no, they're not happy. They have a lot of great things that make life easier, but you're still stuck with the same old thing. In Landmark Forum, they say you're an already always needing to be better than I was. And so I make a million. But I'm. It's not going to be enough, because what I am is a needing more. I get to a billion, and what I am is needing more. And so we know that one. And then the other, I think everybody on the spiritual path eventually gets to a place where I think we all start off, or at least I did, and a lot of people I know, we start off in a spiritually materialistic way, which is, I want to be enlightened, and that's a great goal. And then uh, we pursue that, but really what we're pursuing is just more like an ego development project, right? It's like, I need to be. Well, the egos don't get enlightened in the first place, but that's what we're thinking of, and it's the only way we can relate to the enlightenment goal, at least as Americans, at least in this culture, and I imagine a lot of cultures. It's just, we're so used to doing to become, right? I got to get there, and it's the I that gets tricky.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that uh, like you're saying, there's a part of us that's just our nature to, um, like, I'm just naturally drawn to doing something. And we assume that if we don't have the story that I want that, like the story that I have to get that, I want that, that's my goal now, that's my identity. This the doubt is that if I question that want, then I'm not going to get out of bed in the morning.
Right.
But what what we're playing with here is that there's something just natural in us that is kind of interested in exploring in this direction. Like
Hmm.
there's just a natural interest to get out of bed. And I don't we're assuming that if I don't have this hard goal and this push, that I'm not going to have any motivation. But is that really true?
Yeah.
Like my experience is when I'm most rested and not caring, sometimes that's when I'm most doing in a weird way. But it's like without caring as much. So if I can just take the overlay of I need and I want and my attachment to getting to some external goal that I've set up for myself, if we can take that out of the picture or at least reduce it down to normal size, then my own natural interests will probably get me out of bed, move me to the next thing, and lead me in a very natural way to what it is that I'm actually interested in.
Yes.
So I can almost trust that instead of thinking that I have to use force to get there.
Yeah, I was thinking I was going very deep and philosophical as you're talking about that. It's like getting out of bed is a great like context to like for a philosophical uh situation. It's like and I'm wondering, like I heard this guy once say that something to the effect that we we only um write down a religion after we've been practicing it. It's like first we have to do it and then we have to write it and then we write it down. It's like the acting comes first and then the story comes second. Um, and so I'm wondering, it's like, well, what we are is growth, right? What the universe is this ever expanding, unfolding, growing, complexifying, however, whatever. There seems to be a vector going on here, and I'm part of that vector. And then I've been watching me do this for millions of years or whatever. And then I have a story about it. I observe my own actions and they say, okay, so I need to do this. As if, so this is ego, right? Coming online, commenting on its own nature. And then something happens where it gets lost in its own story of needing to get out of bed. And then that's when the suffering begins. It's very tricky. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's that identification, like I need to do something. I need to be successful at whatever it is that I'm setting out to be successful at. Suddenly, it's like control. I have to control it. I have to be successful, and I better get the plan in place, and I better take the steps in order, and I better it's the whole thing almost gets dumbed down when that happens instead of this very open, natural, childlike interest in expanding and growing and learning that is just innate. We would do it anyway. We would learn things. We would probably make money. We would probably, you know, develop spiritually. All these things just naturally. But then, no, I have to take it on and control it and try to be it. And then when I do get there, that means that I was successful.
Yes.
It's just the, like you say, it's spiritual materialism.
So with that story, I'm limited. The scope is limited, and it's limited to the story. It's like the story. Like another word for what I'm believing is like the rules. Here are the rules. Like here's the balance. Here's the track, and then it's a very limited framework. And then, but if you're able to inquire into that, and those rules aren't as ironclad as they used to be. They're not as material, right? Then what I heard you just saying is that, in my words, is that that actually expands the mind in a creative way. So now we're actually harnessing creativity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Because when I'm limited and I've just got my plan in place and I'm gonna, I've got my 40-year plan, whatever it is, and
Yeah.
I'm like taking this next step, and that's fine and everything, but I can only get that result that I've planned for at best, and
Yes.
there's a lot of chances I won't even get that. So I've limited myself down to something really small. But if I have a plan, but I'm also willing to break that plan. I'm willing to go with new opportunities that happen. I'm willing to take side roads and just follow my heart at the same time. Then the plan will hold me some of the times, but sometimes I'm going to be dropping into new ways and seeing new possibilities and coming out in places that I would have never been able to foresee and plan from. Because
Yes.
where did I created the plan from back here where I can only see from this perspective. But as I go through the process, new vistas are going to open up, and that's going to change things. Like it may be, you know, my favorite example of this is like someone who used to train Air Force pilots once said that this pilot, young rookie pilot, finally was doing his first solo mission, and he's like going from point A to point B, and he's just like going for it. He flew right into a thunderstorm. And then, bottomed out and topped out his altimeter and completely, passed out everything.
Oh yeah.
But somehow came out of the cloud and radioed back to base and said, "Hey, I just went through a thunderstorm. What should I do?" He said, "Just come back to base, forget about getting." And so he does. He turns around, he goes right back into the same thunderstorm.
Yeah.
Same thing happens. And when he
Yeah.
arrives back at the base, there's a whole fire engines and everything there. He lands safely, gets out, and it's like his wings are bent up at like 45 degrees, and he's like, lucky to be alive.
Yeah.
That's the problem with going from point A to point B. I know my plan, I have to go this way. But in real life, things happen between A and B that you can't account for ahead of time, and you have to learn how to adjust and not be rigid about. So I think
Yeah.
that's a great example of
It
what we're
is.
talking about. What the work of Byron Katie would do is say, you have to go from point A to point B. Is it true?
Yeah. In a straight
And
line.
in a straight line, right? Right. And then the turnaround would be you don't have to, and it gives you the freedom to say, yeah, that was my plan, and a I'm taking a detour here because it seems to make sense. Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah. I imagine if he's in another branch, they would have the adapt, improvise, overcome. Maybe.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I like that. Right. So definitely don't need to stay in a straight line, and and then the next level, and what we've been talking about, and I think what your life path does look like is that, in fact, it's not point B, it's point C, and I had never
Exactly.
considered point C.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was planning to go to point B all the time, right? And
Yeah.
then suddenly, that's not actually where I wanted to go. Let me go to point C. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Points.
freedom. That's
Right.
freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So many different directions. So that's freedom, and then also, and then so we have freedom, creativity, and resonance are the three kind of principles that have come up. And now I'm getting real deep and philosophical in my mind about what do these three have in common? How do they work together? Um, and um, I'm also relating this to what an artist goes through, which is one way of art, which is not, I guess, which is antithetical to art, which is fabricating, artifices. It's like I have an idea of what this must look like. It's already going to be a beautiful painting. It has to follow these rules, my specifications of what it's going to be, which is a fabrication, right? It's not in resonance with anything other than your prefabricated story of it. And then, for what I understand, I'm not much of an artist myself or practicing artist, but I understand that there's a lot of um, arduous work that goes into creating art, because you have to constantly be kind of self-defeating and going into questioning, going into again and again, what is it that wants to be created? How do I get out of its way? Right. And that is a practice of kind of tuning to or resonating with a something, but you have to have a mental freedom or some a freedom. I don't know if it's mental or spiritual or emotional. It's a freedom, an open mind to be able to hear what it's saying is, on the compass. Where is point C? Is it point B or is it point C? And so you have to be open to that. And then so here's what I'm kind of riffing on. I want to check it with you. It's like what I think I'm getting out of what you're saying is there is a, a freedom that is cultivated, which is an open mind, and that open mind is able to hear resonance, and the creativity is moving towards that resonance. So what's true for you, or what is, so that's what's truer. So I need to make it $10 million by the time I'm 30 versus I just want to pursue this one path that's deeply resonant, and I don't know if there's going to be 10 million at the end of that or not, but it feels truer. And the only way I get there is by actually, first I have to even just say, is what I'm believing about my 30-year goal true?
Yeah, we're talking about getting more and more in touch with ourselves. Like that's that resonance part there. And when I'm more in touch with myself, that's when creativity comes out because it's coming from inside, it's coming from my heart, not just from my mind and intellect. I'm not just doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm doing something that inspires me and that has energy behind it, not just direction. So the more uh, the more resonance I have, the more in touch I am with that inner part of me that's there. Then the more creative I am, and as I keep referring back to that, the more free I am to break my own rule.
Mm,
And so we're really just pointing to one thing here, which is being in touch with a deeper part of myself, a part of myself that is more who I am. And that's a constant exploration too, because how deep is deep? It can just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. It can go all the way, and there's no end to it. So it's a constant process, and I think that's what life is. It's just constantly, okay, I'm going to expand. I'm going to go out this way, but I'm going to check back in, and I'm going back and forth between this outer and inner, and it just keeps expanding in both directions. And that feels like I am in touch with myself. At the same time, I can I can create ideas of where I'm going to go, but I can also break those ideas. And it is a uh, very organic, creative process. And probably if I just got out of my own way, it would happen automatically. So
yeah.
these techniques coming in of meditation that we're talking about, they're just there as a way of helping me get out of my own way. But if I can just do that, I don't even need anything.
Yeah.
It's our nature to be that.
Being a student in high school and you being my teacher, a big theme of the Bhagavad Gita is Dharma. And for those that don't know, Dharma is something like walking your path, right? Which is exactly what you're talking about here. So what's in resonance with your true nature, with you,
And
that's
one of
Dharma.
the things the Gita says is that, you know, you're it's better to walk your own path, follow your own dharma, than to try to follow the dharma of another, because the dharma of another brings danger. That's more or less what it says there. And you can take that to be comparing yourself to other people, or even comparing yourself to some version of yourself that doesn't feel resonant anymore.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
you're following some version of what you think you should be that is not actually in in resonance with where you are. So it's yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that takes a ton of courage, honestly, because and um, for worse, we've been trusting the story All right, the formula for what's going to make me happy, and even what is my version of a life well lived. Right? And then to question that is one thing, and then but then to have faith in that message that's coming, that's that takes a lot because you could be wrong, right? Or at least that's what the mind says. Like that could be a huge mistake. You should just stick to the old way, right?
It takes humility as well because it means that I don't, you know, I don't really know for sure what is the right thing. All I know is this is the best, this is where I feel right for me right now. And it may be less than what um, these big ideals I have for myself
Yeah.
are. So it's just dialing it back. That's what this is all about.
Hmm.
Coming back to what is my own experience. I think that's really the key of it. Coming back to my own experience, living out of my own experience rather than living out of my ideals. And ideals are great, but they're kind of like little reference points, possible possibilities. But I have to stick with where am I actually at? What's my actual experience? That keeps me connected to myself. That keeps me in resonance. That keeps me in freedom. That gives me creativity. That is where it's at.
Recently, I was thinking about the kind of polarity of traditional conservative versus liberal progressive, and a lot of what we're talking about, the creativity, listening to your own song, your own tune, tuning into your own resonance, your own that open mindedness. That those are progressive virtues, right? And at least how that's how I think of it. And um, and then there's the traditional, and the traditional kind of keeps me safe, And one thing that I had an internal battle with is that I actually um, feel like I could go off the deep end if I just fully went into like I'm just going to do what I exactly how I feel in the moment, just fully expressed. And I just so the long story is there. I really appreciate both um,
Yeah.
polarities there.
Yeah, they're
Um,
both necessary. We need liberal, we need conservative. We need rules, they hold us. And then we also need to break the rules. We need both, and those two opposites need to work together in communication with each other, within each of us, as well as in our society, so that we can get the benefit of both. Because otherwise, um, yeah, if I'm completely almost rule-less, there are some disadvantages to that. But if I'm completely rule-bound, there's some disadvantages to that. And
yeah,
somehow, if I can hold each lightly, then there's a way to navigate that feels right, but also can play in the world. I think of this is one of the key things I've noticed with the work of Byron Katie in my own life is that it has allowed me to integrate more into the world. It's allowed me to, um, yeah, to not just have one side to an experience, but to be open to even being materialistic, and to learn how to play the game and to not be too rigidly attached to one. But what I'm kind of playing with here is that all sides are needed, both sides are needed,
yeah.
and so if one is too far out of alignment, you'll notice it. It feels like stress.
Mm-hmm.
Too much attachment to the rules, stress. Too much breaking the rules can be stressful.
Mm-hmm.
So stress will tell you when it's too much for you. There's no absolutes on this, but if you notice stress, trust it. That's your alarm clock just saying, hey, check it out. Is it really true what you're thinking here and believing? Because it might be that there's something you're missing, and that's a good time to regroup.
Yeah, yeah. It brings up this this thing keeps coming up in my head as we're talking, which is it's my observation, and I imagine you'd agree that it's the nature of us to believe stories, right? It's our nature to create them and then to believe them. And one of the things that I've seen with myself, and but it's easier to spot it in others within the Byron Katie community specifically, is that we'll sit around, listen to Byron Katie and do the work, and keep hearing, "Is it true? Is it true? Is it true?" And and then we start actually believing that it's not true, and then nothing's true, right? And that children should suffer, right, or something like that. And it's so easy because that's what the mind's geared to do, right? And so it's like people hear the philosophy of Byron Katie without doing the actual taking the trip and actually looking at the story, then you're going to jump to the conclusion that everything's great. I don't have to worry about it. It's like I don't need to do anything.
Right, right. So this is really, really important that it it has to be it's an experiential thing. That's why I say the work is a meditation. It has to be done. It's not a philosophy. It's an experience of balancing whenever I've noticed myself get out of balance. It's not a philosophy or that I have to just now adopt as my new religion. That would be very confusing. So yeah, I think that's right on.
Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's really, really a pleasure.
Quick question: how can people find you?
Oh, sure. Just go to theworkasmeditation.com and you'll
Wonderful.
find all kinds of things there. I've got courses on how to do the work. I've got, articles, hundreds of articles on the work of Byron Katie and videos and tons of stuff. So yeah, check it out, theworkasmeditation.com.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very much.
you.